Hi, you all. My name is Vanessa Oliver, and I'm one of the dietitians at UK Health and Wellness. And hello to you all online. Thanks for attending today. I'm glad that we're able to offer this streaming opportunity. We'll also be recording this presentation. So if you missed something that I said, or if you want to refer back to it later, then you'll be able to do that, and we'll send that link out in an email after the presentation. So what we're talking about today is really trying to get back to basics when it comes to food, right? Specifically, and food. Does anyone feel like healthy eating is complicated? Yeah, okay, so for the folks online, I just got a lot of nods and some raised hands and some grimaces even. So I know it kind of seems like that too, right? It seems like healthy eating advice is always changing. You should drink coffee, you should stop drinking coffee, drink lots of wine, wine is bad, whatever, right? I know it's all beverages. But sometimes it feels like when you're looking at that nutrition information or reading about it, it seems like it makes your healthy habits quite complicated, okay? Do you feel like you overcomplicate your own healthy habits beyond that, beyond reading what's in the headlines? Where do you think this getting in your own way might come from? Do you think you get in your own way? Yeah, some nods. All right. And I want to make sure too that I differentiate a little bit of something here. Of course, with any new behavior, okay, and maybe eating healthy is a new behavior for you, but with any new behavior, there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve, and that's fine, right? That is normal. There should be a learning curve. No one is going to be perfect at something right away. And if you keep expecting that you should be, then maybe that's where you're getting in your own way, right? But everyone's going to have their own path, their own track, their own system, and there's no such thing as one right way. There is not. So if you have a book or a website or a friend who's telling you, I have found the secret path to blank, I would disagree respectfully, okay? So if you feel like, though, whatever way that you choose is too hard or too difficult, then that's what we want to sort of break down today. So what are some things that maybe lead you to this way of thinking? What are some things that lead you to thinking that there is just one way and that one way is terrible? Does anyone have any ideas there? Or maybe you've tried different things before and none of them worked. Does that sound familiar? Some nods there, okay. How about some really compelling headlines? Can anyone tell me something they've read recently that sounds like it just grabbed them right away and was like, oh, this must be the thing? Nothing jumping out at you yet. Okay, that's okay. Lots of times this compelling marketing takes advantage of the fact that we're drawn to authority figures. If I had on a white coat right now, would you take everything that I was saying as the absolute truth? Maybe, right? They've done actual studies on that. With us being compelled to follow what authority figures are saying. But a lot of us really do think, I think that it all boils down to one thing. If it's not hard, if it's not difficult, then it's not the right way. Have you guys ever felt that, right? Yeah. And so a lot of times marketers will take advantage of that fact by creating very distinct rules of what you can and cannot do, because they know that that's how they're going to hook you in, right? And that's how they're going to get you to follow their system. But really what we want to do is work on your self-confidence and work on your self-efficacy to find the simple way to eat well, okay? So if you feel like getting healthy is hard, I want to sort of deconstruct that just a little bit. So maybe you've thought some of these things before, all right? So what does this mean, we want a magic bullet? What's that magic bullet mean? It's like a quick fix, right? Does a quick fix work? No. Might work for a little period of time, yeah? But more often it overcomplicates things because it's not a sustainable solution. Okay, so what happens if it's not a sustainable solution? Then we have to look for another one. And then we have to look for another one. So we're always, always searching. And that can make getting healthy complicated or feel complicated. It feels easier to follow rules. I cannot, if I had a nickel for every time I sat down with someone, they're like, just tell me what to eat. And I can see from your expressions too that you've probably felt this before, right? Just tell me what to eat. Then I'll know if I'm doing it right. Okay? And what this does, what it means instead, you're really saying, I don't want to make these decisions myself. So if someone else makes these decisions for me, and if I fail, then it's their fault. Right? So if things don't want to happen the way that you want them to, then you're not to blame. It's the plan's fault, or it's the person's fault. And it's hard, right? You know, this sort of thinking might feel good in the short term, but again, it's not sustainable for that long term, because we know that circumstances are going to change, right? What if you're following a plan and it tells you to eat these very particular things, and then you go to a friend's house for dinner? They're not serving what's on your menu. Then what do? Right? So you need this adaptability, okay? We wouldn't fail if it wasn't complicated, okay? Again, this gives us an out. If we make it harder than it needs to be, then we have that out. This sentence, getting healthy is hard, how does that distract us from focusing on the real issues? It means that we're really not doing the hard work to figure out what works for us, right? Because it is hard, right? Change is hard. Okay, it's going to be a little bit hard, but we generally want to avoid any kind of discomfort. We generally want to avoid any kind of difficulty that comes with that self-awareness that we need to figure out on. But you know, it is going to take a little bit of work. But work can be joyful. All right, work doesn't have to be terrible. We might feel like there's a lot of information overload, and a lot of plans that you might have read about or heard about, they do have some good qualities, absolutely. But again, there's not just one best way, okay? And so what'll happen often is that we default to these old patterns because that's what we know, right? Again, we don't have to learn something new. So breaking out of this cycle, I just want to tell you, can be absolutely liberating, all right? But it is a process. And I know we all love change, right? Yeah. But what we're looking for ultimately is that breakthrough, okay? And if we're looking for that breakthrough, if we're looking for that different result, then that means that we have to look for a different process, all right? So we can't default to these old patterns. Because if we think all of these things, then getting healthy is hard becomes what? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You're already telling your future before it happens. Okay, so we want to get out of that habit. And really what that comes down to is breaking it down. Looking at these small steps, okay? Breaking it down means things are going to be less overwhelming. It might mean that you work with a friend or a coach or a mentor, someone like us at Wellness. If you want to do something, you are going to find a way, right? But if you don't want to do something, you're always going to find an excuse. So let's find that way instead, all right? So again, some signs that you might be making it a little bit too complicated, particularly with behavior change. This is a train of thought that might happen first, especially ones that have to do with food, right? Because there's a lot of different plans that are out there. So whether you call it a plan, a diet, a lifestyle, a lot of people are using the word protocol now because it sounds super sciencey. Whatever you want to call it though, a lot of people have gotten away from using the word diet, right? So what does diet begin with? Die. Yeah, it's terrible. So more or less, everyone has started to agree that dieting may not work. All right, I think that's a really nice step in the right direction. But if you're still looking at some barriers to changing your behavior, you might be frequently questioning whether or not you're doing the right thing. All right, whether you're following the rules, whether you're following a diet, that sort of thing. You might be constantly like worrying that you're going to make the wrong decision. And this is paralyzing, right? If you're constantly worrying that you're going to make a misstep, this is going to derail your efforts. You'll have to start all over. You've made no progress. Is any of that really true? No. What would you tell your friend if they were thinking these thoughts? You tell them that it's okay. You can just start again with the next meal, with the next day, with the next week. It's all right. But when it's yourself, we're our own harsh critic, right? So we're constantly worrying that we're making the wrong decision. I would challenge you instead to retrain your brain, right? Instead of like telling yourself that you made a mistake, because what's that doing? That's not changing what happened. That's just changing how you feel about what happened, right? You're just telling yourself like, I'm a terrible person. You're only affecting how you're processing the event. And it's usually with guilt and it's usually with shame. And we want to avoid those things, especially when it comes to food, okay? But one thing that you can practice telling yourself is that there is no wagon when it comes to food, right? You're not on the wagon. You're not off the wagon, all right? You are just going along a continuum, all right? And think about other ways that you can process a particular outcome besides telling yourself that you made a mistake, all right? It's a challenge for sure. But you want to recognize that it's a continuum and you can just inch forward towards your goal just a little bit over time. You feel busy but not productive. What do I mean by this? I kind of liken this to like, remember when you used to, when you were in grammar school, right? And you got your new Trapper Keeper or your new binder or whatever. You got really excited in the days before school started and you started color coding things and you started organizing things. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm just the only person that, but you did all of these things, felt like you were really getting ready for something. But did any of that really make a huge difference in the semester or the year? You probably stopped by week 2, right? So if you feel like you're constantly, you know, doing all of these things, but maybe not seeing results that you want, yeah, I would get frustrated too. All right, so real health change doesn't have to do with that busy, busy, busy work. And then lastly too, if you feel a sign that you might be making it too complicated is that your changes are not meaningful to you. So if you're forcing yourself to make these changes that are not in alignment with your value system, then that's not going to work, is it? So it means that you might have to do that work of figuring out what your values are first. Again, takes some work, but knowing what your values are going to help give this validity to your actions and really get you on that path to sustainable change and learning the basics of nutrition, all right? Because again, we're all about looking for those sustainable changes, for those long-term patterns of diet, because that's what's really gonna make a big difference, okay? And there are a lot of intensive sort of lifestyle programs out there. Some of them you've probably heard of, and these are ones that are gonna help like maintain weight, lower blood pressure, maybe prevent diabetes, all over the long term, okay? Now these are not diet programs and that's not what we're talking about today. That's not what we talk about at Wellness, okay? These are behavioral programs looking at long-term patterns for living, all right? Have you heard of any programs like this? What are some that come to mind that might sort of fit these definitions? Has anyone heard of the DPP, the Diabetes Prevention Program? That's one that's offered on campus through Brown Barnstable Brown Center. That's for people who may have health measures that they could be developing pre-diabetes, for example. Okay, there's a lot of research that's being done on this program that shows that it leads to long-term change. Maybe the Mediterranean diet. You guys heard about that one? Yeah, lots of nods there. The DASH diet. Maybe now I know that they have diet, but they just haven't sort of changed their term yet, right? What about one program that just changed its name recently? A big commercial? Yeah, what are they called now? Weight Watchers. They're called WW, right? They've even taken the word weight right out of the name. Because again, they're promoting that this is a lifestyle program. And that is what is going to work. So these changes, that's what we want to look at. Okay, we're going to look at changes that are going to fuel all aspects of our life. Okay, and these changes aren't often covered in the headlines, right? Headlines can be governed by a lot of special interest groups, by lobbyists, by politicians, by marketers. They may or may not have your best interests at heart. They can make diet advice sound like it changes all the time, like I mentioned in the very beginning, and that's super maddening. But in reality, the fundamentals of eating well really have not changed at all. Okay, they really, really haven't. So what I want to talk about is what they really should say. And so I've got some easy tips, you know, the clickbait, right? 5 easy tips to eating well. This is what we're going to talk about today. All right. So any questions before I get going into that? Okay. So the first one, if any of you know me, and some of you do, I say this all the time, right? Eat more plants. Whether it's leaves or seeds or buds or shoots, whatever it is, eat them. We're talking about vegetables, we're talking about fruit, we're talking about whole grains, right? Any or all of them. If you don't like fruit, that's okay. Okay? If you don't like vegetables, I challenge you, you probably like at least 2. Okay? If you don't like whole grains, it's okay, eat regular grains, but eat a variety. All right? Variety is really the key. There is no one that is better than the other. There's no super fruit or super vegetable. All right? There's bound to be something in the beautiful plant kingdom that even the most hearty vegetable skeptic is going to love. Do I have anyone here who just hates vegetables? Okay, not to put any of you on the spot. Maybe some of you online, right? But if you did, right, this is something that we would be able to talk through in a consult. This is something that in one-on-one discussion, I hear from a lot of people like, well, I really just don't like vegetables. And more often than not, we'll go through a conversation. They'll be like, oh, well, yeah, I like green peppers. Great, eat those. That's okay, all right? You don't have to eat kale because it's trendy. You don't have to eat raw cauliflower because it's on every single menu now. All right, just eat what you like, and it more often than not will work out in the wash. But hopefully you're interested in expanding your habits and looking for that variety. And that is something that we would be able to talk about definitely through a wellness consult, just looking at some ways that maybe you haven't thought of to eat more plants. Okay? What's next? Eating less junk, right? So what's less junk? I can hear you asking. There's a picture there. That'll give you some ideas, but I have full confidence that y'all know what junk is, right? I don't have to tell you, okay? It's food with lots of calories. It's food with lots of sugar, lots of salt, not nearly enough nutritional value for all of those calories, okay? Maybe it's soda, maybe it's heavily sweetened drinks, maybe it's highly processed foods, maybe it's packaged foods, maybe fast foods, maybe foods that are meant to make you crave them and buy them and eat them before you've even realized what you've done, okay? But you know what it is when you see it. And when you see it, just don't eat too much of it, okay? I'm not saying don't eat it, but I'm saying eat less of it. Okay, don't eat more or less than you need, right? So although on any given day, it's really difficult to tell whether you are doing this, over the long term, there are some indicators. So for example, if your clothes are fitting differently and you don't want them to, all right, that might be an indicator that your eating habits might want to change, okay? You might think about what the true value of a meal deal is. Is it really a deal? Okay. Does it align with your values? If that meal deal does align with your values, great, eat it, all right? But if it doesn't align with your values and what your goal is right now, then maybe think about what your other options are, okay? But don't eat more or less than you need to. Any questions so far? Tammy, are there any questions online? Okay. All right, next, again, going into the variety. Yes, you want to eat a variety, but look at those last few words. Eat a variety of foods that you enjoy. Again, you don't have to eat something just because someone is saying you should eat this, all right? Now, there's research on the health implications of just about everything, as I mentioned in the beginning, all right? Some foods might be good for you. Some foods maybe you should eat in smaller amounts, okay? But the evidence for most foods is so inconsistent through history that you should never force yourself to eat foods that you don't want to just because some headline says something. Nor should you deny yourself eating foods that you do want to eat, okay? If you love the foods that I had listed in that heart on the junk food slide, then eat some in moderation, okay? But eat them, all right? And if you make make a choice to follow that first rule, right, to eat more plants, then you're creating a lot of wiggle room in your diet anyway. So I think that this is a good place to bring up one of my favorite phrases when it comes to nutrition, besides eat more plants, and that is science-based recommendations, evidence-based recommendations, right? I just want to say that arriving at any sort of truth, and I'm sure you've sort of gathered this by now, but arriving at any sort of truth about human nutrition, it's not easy, okay? We can't keep research subjects locked up in a room, keep them captive, right? Just feed them what we want to feed them when we want to for the rest of their lives. We can't do that. The IRB would get really mad at us, for example. It takes a long time for a lot of health conditions to develop. It's difficult to follow subjects that long, right? We can't feed anyone anything until it kills them. Although, sidebar, there's a really interesting book that's coming out right now. It's called The Poison Squad, and it's about a man who did just that back in like the early 1900s. He was trying to basically establish USDA guidelines because at the time there were none, and who knew what was in your food? There's all sorts of chemicals and things in your milk or in your butter. It wasn't really what you thought it was. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, look for a book called The Poison Squad. But ultimately, we can't just feed things to people until they die. So that's the walk away there. We do have to rely on some research. We have to rely on population data. We have to rely on questionnaires. Those questionnaires are full of self-reported data. What did you eat in the last 3 days? Do you remember what you ate in the last 3 days? Exactly. Did you measure it? Maybe you did. Most likely you did not. All right. But this is what a lot of our nutrition research is based upon. Okay, so it's a little bit difficult. What does science-based mean? I'm shrugging for those of you who are online. Okay. And that's not even mentioning the fact that most of that nutrition research that has been done in the past, what population has that been done on? Do you all know? Healthy men. We have all women in this in-person presentation. I wonder how many women we have online. Yeah. Yeah. So all of this is to say, when I say eat blank in moderation, it's not a wishy-washy statement, okay? It's what we know to be true. It acknowledges the limitations of science. And there should be limitations in science, right? We know that most plants are good, for example. We know that most junk foods aren't. But in between, there's a whole lot of nuance, and that's how science should be. It's an ever-evolving discipline, okay? All right. This one I think is very important. Finding the joy in your food. I feel like sometimes the joy has been taken out of eating a little bit. If you can eat joyfully, if you can eat mindfully, then we can really learn to enjoy these changes in our food behaviors. So you don't want to squander this joy, right? If you're not paying attention to what you're eating, if you're just mindlessly shoving something in your face, that's not fun, okay? So try to find a little bit of pleasure in every meal. Now, learning to cook might help with this. For some of you, I understand it will definitely not. There's just nothing you enjoy about cooking. That's fair, okay? That's okay. I will say that any food that you can at least sort of create a semi-homemade dish at home, even if you're taking pre-made things from the grocery store and putting them together, that's still going to be miles better than anything that you get when you eat out. Okay, it's going to have less sugar, less salt, less fat. You're going to have more joy because you know that you've prepared it and put it on the table for yourself. You have that ability to feed yourself, okay? And finding the joy in your food is definitely a big step to eating well. And what have I got next? This goes back to realizing what your own values are, okay? You are valuable. You have values, okay? Now, you might have very specific goals when it comes to nutrition, okay, beside your values, and that's okay, all right? Maybe you have performance goals. Maybe you're an athlete, all right? Maybe people with a chronic disability, for example, might have to adjust goals to account for limitations that they're experiencing, and that's okay. Maybe you have vanity goals. That is totally okay, all right? If you feel better when you look a certain way, great. That's awesome, okay? But achieve those goals in a long-term way that's going to be sustainable for you, okay? You don't want to have your self-worth tied up in whatever goal you have. All right, so no matter what your goals might be, all right, if you're not getting the majority of your calories from real food, okay, following those guidelines, my dietary guidelines that I just mentioned, if you're not moving your body a few times a week, whatever that might mean to you, okay, if you're not avoiding prolonged periods of sitting down, staring at a screen with no break, if you're not getting a meaningful amount of sleep, for most people that's about 7 to 9 hours a night. I don't know how that happens, but that's the definition, okay? And if you're not maintaining strong social relationships, all right? If you're not doing all of those things, then, you know, you could be healthier, right? You've got some room to improve. That's where you can start working on things. You don't have to buy a new book to start a new diet or a new protocol, okay? Those are the areas of your life that you want to look at. And as long as those areas of your life and those proposed changes that you want to make in those areas of your life add up and match with what's important to you, they match what your values are, then that's when you're going to be successful, okay? And those are truly, truly, truly the basic rules of eating well, all right? Those are going to be the rules of your engagement right there. So how do you start doing this? I would say the major thing is you're going to need some support, right? Without ongoing support, we often revert back to maybe some habits that we wanted to change. So it doesn't matter if you're following a specific program, but whatever you do choose, I would urge you to find support, wherever that might be, okay? Maybe it's your friends, your family, your church, your coworkers, us, whoever it is, okay? We don't want to forget that food behavior or any behavior is not an irreversible thing, okay? There's no such thing as change. There's no such thing as one and done, all right? Because what that attitude often produces instead is a completely what? Completely opposite reaction from what we're looking for. So it's not that lifestyle programs are futile necessarily, or that change is futile, but you want to make sure that you've got that support. So this behavioral change comes in a lot of different forms. The ones that work, like I mentioned, are the ones that focus on long-term outcome. They focus on sustainable change. That's why programs like ours that support healthy lifestyles, right? The eating, the sleeping, the moving, the getting up from your desk once in a while, Those are all the ones that are going to work, okay? They're not magic. They may not be easy, but they're the ones that are going to work. So support programs, whether they come from us, whether they come from a clinic, whether they come from your local Y, okay? That's what's actually going to help you lead a healthier life. If you want to talk more about my guidelines, my dietary guidelines, or if you'd like to talk to Karen Brylan McNeese, who's the other dietitian that we have with UK Health and Wellness, you can make an appointment for a nutrition consult. We can see you in person, over the phone, over Skype or Zoom, or we can do an email consult. And there's a link on the left that shows you how to make that appointment. It's through your Live Well dashboard. We also have a series of these types of talks that are happening this semester. The next one's coming up October 25th. It's going to be presented by Carrie Davidson of Move Well, and it'll be called Move Well to Live Well. You can see that'll be offered in person and online at 102 Mining and Minerals. If you have any questions for judging daily intake, I suppose it would depend on what your goals are. I would say that knowing that what your calorie level is a tool. It's not the only thing to look at, right? Just like a scale is useful, it can give you information, but it's not telling you what kind of success you're having, okay? And you know, to be perfectly transparent, we use calories as a tool in our programming, but we definitely don't have people live or die by them. Absolutely not. But calories are a fact of life. That's true. Does everyone do well to count them? No, not at all. Does that answer your question? Looking at calories, I would recommend you look at types of food. Again, if you feel like you could expand your horizons a little bit, and maybe you're curious about expanding the variety of the foods that you eat, but you really don't know where to start, there is a handout that was available to you as you walked in, and I believe Tammy has put it online or is going to put it online. And it's called Food is Fuel. And really what we've done is just broken down foods into the 3 largest groups that we can. They're called macronutrients: protein, fats, and carbohydrates. I think you've all probably heard of those. And what's listed are the highest quality examples of those proteins, those fats, and those carbohydrates. These are all foods you could get at any grocery store. You don't have to go to a fancy grocery store to get these foods. But just in case you're looking for that balance, choose 2 out of 3 of those for a meal. Add a vegetable if you can, and you're done. Okay? It's not necessarily about getting very complicated with it. Yes? What is your take on it? It's about stevia and whether or not it's different from artificial sweeteners and what my take on it is. So stevia in and of itself is a plant, right? And if you pick the leaf and you chew the leaf, it's sweet. And so whoever found this is like, oh, we can make some money off of this. So what they've done is they've synthesized the chemicals that are in that stevia plant to create the product that is now marketed as stevia, but it's usually like Truvia or Purevia or something like that. So for one, it's important to distinguish the difference between stevia the plant and then the synthesized packaged sweetener. All right? So the stevia the plant, most of us are not going to chew on a leaf and then drink our iced tea, you know, although that would probably work. But you can buy like a distilled, like a dropper, where you can drop, basically it's like a distilled version of that herb. And that would be the most quote unquote natural version of that stevia, okay? The stuff that you buy in the packets it's another artificial sweetener, all right? It's generally regarded as safe, okay? And that is a defined term, meaning we haven't found anything with it that's scary or dangerous. Has there been a lot of long-term research on it? Not yet, okay? Is it going to, by your question, it doesn't affect your body the same way as artificial sweeteners? What did you mean? Oh, okay. Sure, sure. So there is a very popular theory right now that a lot of artificial sweeteners give you that sweet taste without giving you calories, and therefore makes you crave more sweet foods. Now, that is a totally interesting theory, and I am really eager to see how that research plays out. It has not yet, okay? But if you feel like artificial sweeteners make you crave more sweet foods, okay, then that is something to listen to. Again, you're listening to your body. And that is a behavior that I would encourage. Can I say scientifically that stevia will or will not do this? I cannot say that, okay? But if you feel like your goal includes getting fewer calories from added sugar, and stevia is a way for you to do that, then I would encourage that goal. The question was, do I feel like seasonal eating is going to make eating well easier or harder, essentially? If eating seasonally is easier for you, then it will make it easy, okay? If you live close to a source of locally grown seasonal foods and it's easily accessible for you and it's within your budget, then yeah, sure, I would definitely recommend that, right? But if you feel like maybe frozen vegetables are the best way for you to get your veggie intake, then I would absolutely encourage you to do that, okay? Eating seasonally, for some people who are maybe wanting to take that step, lots of those foods might have a little bit of a fresher taste. You might enjoy that experience of going to your farmer or to your farmer's market to get those fruits or vegetables or other foods, and that's going to add to the joy of your eating, I would say. But is it you have to do this in order to eat well? No, not necessarily. Between farm-raised and wild-caught seafood, and are there concerns with eating one or the other? So there are certainly environmental concerns, but I'm assuming that you mean nutritional concerns. I won't say common. Recent knowledge has suggested that some farm-raised fish might be fed some things that we might not want in our bodies. They might be raised in conditions that are not humane and maybe a little less than we would consider clean, okay? And so for that reason, some farm-raised fish have been classified as something you should not eat, all right? What do I have to say to that? I have to say to that that in all likelihood, you're probably not eating enough fish in your diet for any of those to really make a marked difference in your particular human nutrition, okay? Maybe if you ate nothing but fish and you ate buckets and buckets of it, maybe, yes, some of those things that are in fish could build up in your system, okay? But more than likely, it's not going to make a difference. If you can afford wild-caught salmon and that makes you feel better, then absolutely go for it. But I would heartily recommend, you know, StarKist tuna in a bag as a lean protein that is portable and that you can keep in your office for a quick snack. Yes, okay, I got a thumbs up on that one. Yes, I have a question in the back. Starchy vegetables, particularly potatoes, corn, peas, winter squash, sweet potatoes. Those are all going to be considered starchy vegetables. And what's my take on it? Should we eat them? Yeah, they're still vegetables. Sure. So those vegetables are going to have more carbohydrates than something like, say, broccoli, right? But you want to look at that bigger picture. All of those, the sheet that's in front of you, the carbohydrates, the fats, the proteins, those are all important parts of your diet, okay? And I know that the low carb thing ebbs and flows in terms of popularity, okay? Potatoes get thrown under the bus as something that you absolutely should not eat. Yeah, oftentimes we do eat potatoes in that deep fried state known as French fries. They are delicious, okay? Lots of times we eat big baked potatoes as big as your head, covered with sour cream and butter and bacon. Do we think that's how we should always eat potatoes? If you want to eat them, fine, okay? Is it going to have more calories and more fat than a potato not prepared that way? Yes. Okay, maybe you have room for that, maybe you don't. Maybe that's within your value system, maybe it's not, okay? But do I sit down to a potato? Yes, I'll probably eat one for dinner tonight. you know. If you're looking for potatoes that maybe, let's say, someone wants to lose weight, okay, maybe someone is looking to change the types of foods that they're eating in order to get closer to that goal, then they might look at a potato that's a portion size that would make sense with those particular goals. All right, and generally that portion size is going to be as big as this computer mouse right here. Okay, so that kind of goes into maybe a different question, but yeah, I would definitely include potatoes as a healthy part of my diet. Global, and I'm happy to answer your questions. Thanks very much.